What's good, YouTube? It's your boy coming at you with a Q&A video. I got some questions from some of my friends and subscribers, and I'm happy to answer them here today. Yeah, let's just hop right into it. The first topic that I'm kind of tackling is my profession. I am also a teacher, which is something that's kind of hard to balance, showing off my personal life so much and also maintaining a professional relationship, with my students, their parents, etc. But so the first question regarding teaching is, how did you decide teaching was for you? And which is actually a very interesting question, because when people ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up, for the longest time I just kind of said teacher for no real reason. And so as time got closer to start pick a career, I just kind of led with teaching. I had a scholarship opportunity that helped me greatly. And so I said, you know what, let me go for it. And the more I dove into it, the more I realized I loved it. The more I was able to look back on my past teachers that I had and say, wow, that really affected me in a positive way. And even in some cases going, wow, that really affected me in a negative way. I don't want kids to go through that. And so being able to kind of learn from my past teachers' successes and failures and being able to emulate them in a good way to make sure that I can give my students a future where when they look back on their past, they're very fond of it and very glad that they went through the things that they did. In short, it's just I want to give kids a good life experience. The same way I feel like for the most part, I had a good life experience coming up. I went through my own struggles and tribulations as anyone does, but overall I would rate my experience as good, and I want to give that same thing, if not better, to today's age of children. Somebody asked me, how do I keep kids engaged whenever they're distracted or lacking in motivation? And this is really a tricky one because every kid is different. The number one, kind of thing I can say to this is getting to know each and every one of your kids, or even if you don't know them super well, having a super close kind of relationship with them, as much as you can as a teacher with a child. But I feel like I have developed a closeness with my students in a way to where they trust me and respond to me really well. And so they can kind of tell that when I need them to do something or need them to act in a certain way, they know that they kind of need to fall into that kind of position. And there are some times where they just don't care or don't respond to it, in which case one thing that helps me is, if I can, and you can't always do this, but if I can, what I do is I try to single out that student in a way that doesn't publicly demean them, but in a way that kind of forces them to re-engage. Sometimes that's as simple as asking them to repeat what I just said to the entire class. Sometimes it's a little bit more where I kind of pause the lesson in an appropriate spot and tell the students, all of you do this, and I pull that student aside and I work one-on-one with them. Because when you work one-on-one with the student, they really don't have a choice but to engage in the things that you're teaching them. And so that's a strategy I found that works really well when I can. And there's one thing that you definitely have to recognize, is that sometimes you don't need to give up on a student, but you need to recognize in that moment you might not be able to win them over without giving up the rest of the class. And so there are times where I have to choose whether do I derail this lesson to get this kid re-engaged, and then I kind of have to start over with everything and then another student falls out of place, or do I get through this as best as I can and then pull that student aside and reteach later? Because if they're not engaged, there's usually a fairly decent reason for it. And the best thing you can do sometimes is get through the lesson as long as they're not disrupting it, and then give them the lesson later. And other teachers might see this and say, whoa, don't agree with this. I'm only in my second year of teaching. I can only speak to what works for me. But these are some things that I found to work in my current situation. Another step up from that is tips for classroom management when kids are being rowdy. One thing I know for certain is that don't meet their energy. If you're trying to teach and they're out of here and you bring your energy all the way up here, it's not going to bring them down to the right level. It's going to make them sad, especially at a really young age. They don't understand, for the most part, that you're just mad at one or two people. Your anger just kind of floods them, and so it can have a very strong effect on their emotions. Like I mentioned earlier, developing a close relationship with all your kids and really getting to understand them, you'll start to notice what affects certain kids and what doesn't. Certain kids, if you tell them you're gonna call mom or dad or whoever, immediately, boom, they snap right back to it. If you tell them you're going to change their conduct or take away whatever incentive that they're working towards, that works on some students, doesn't work for everyone. Some students, the principal's office is like a end of the road for them. Like, that is the absolute worst thing that could happen to them. And for some kids, that's, I don't care. They might act out because subconsciously they know they're going to get out of class if you're going to send them to the principal's office. So you really do have to know each kid. The best thing there's really no set thing or strategy that you can do that's just going to work every time. But like I said, the one thing that I can say, just do not match their energy. Just bring the energy back down here as best you can. Because if you bring it up to a here, they're not going to respond to that very well. Somebody asked, what is my favorite thing about teaching? And the best way I can describe that is, if I look back on the end of my first year teaching, at the end of the year, our school does kind of awards for each grade level, not just, the people leaving the school or anything, but each grade level gets some sort of reward, whether it's just completion of grade level or if it's just like a classroom citizenship award, a star student award, honor roll, something like that. Every student gets some sort of chance to be honored. Some students get higher honors than others, but the main thing that I see that really ties together kind of everything for me, everything that I do in the teaching world, is the look on the parents and the students' faces when they have a chance to be honored in front of people. You get to see that they are truly proud of the work that they've put in, how far they've come, like the students and the parents. It really does show. It's kind of hard to see as a teacher because you see your kids every day. So even though they've been making progress all year, they started here and now they're here. Every day you see here, and then 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 you see here. So you don't really see the high levels of growth that your kids go through until you kind of hit this moment where you see how proud they are of themselves and how proud their parents are of them. And you realize that you've just had this great impact in for lack of a better term, like the molding of a human being, and really getting to see how far they've come. And I think that's just an amazing thing. And there's little tiny things that happen every day that make that moment just kind of this heavy realization, like, wow, I love what I do. Somebody else asks, what are some things that college didn't prepare me for as a teacher? And this is a really interesting one. So I had a phenomenal mentor teacher, not in that they were just a great all-around teacher themselves, but also that they really cared for me and looked out for me in ways that I kind of didn't even realize until they laid it out for me. One of which was that they really kind of shielded me from the massive workload that being a teacher was, because they had just recently started. I think they were on their third or fourth year of teaching themselves, and so it was fresh in their mind of what it was like to be a student teacher, and so they kind of shielded me from a lot of things because they empathized with me really well. And so me personally, the things that I was not prepared for um, maybe you will be prepared for, but there's like one thing in particular that comes to mind that even as a student teacher, I don't think you'll be particularly prepared for when you become your own teacher. Excuse all the fidgeting. But even when you become a teacher yourself, there's one main thing that I don't think you'll be prepared for, and that is the amount of documentation and communication that is necessary to get your kids the accommodations, to get them just overall the help that they need from the different departments within the school, as well as to have enough of a relationship with their parents in order to kind of because you're taking part in the upbringing of their child, and so in a really small way you're a little bit co-parenting with the parent. They're not your child, but there are some things you're doing that are parenting like. Take this one with a grain of salt, because I don't have any kids of my own, and I don't feel exactly right kind of speaking on what it means to be a parent. But when you and their parent are taking part in this student's upbringing, there are things that you can work together on, but only if you communicate on it. One thing that I've made a big change on recently is really, so this documentation and parent communication thing really go hand in hand. What I've started doing is, for my two students who need the most help with their behavior, I have just started documenting everything that they do and what the consequence, whether it be positive or negative, was for that. There's a lot of papers and like styles of documentation that your school district might provide you, but me personally, I just use lined paper. On one side I write date, and on the other side I write behavior / consequence or follow-up if applicable. And I document everything, good and bad. If the student won't stop talking or being disruptive while I'm teaching, I document that, and I document if I gave them a warning, if I moved their conduct, if I told them I was going to email their family, or whatever was going to happen. If they do something good as well, like I had a student the other day where he was being very disruptive through most of the day, I was documenting all of that. But at the end of the day, he was like, he realized, like, I haven't gotten to move my conduct up yet. And so he locked in for the last, probably hour of the day, finished his assignments early, and when he was done, instead of talking with his classmates like he had been throughout the day, he opened up a book that he's been reading, and he's been rereading to try and, get it down, because he wants to become a better reader. We're kind of at a point now where I have all of these things that my students do, two of them in particular, all the things that they do documented on a sheet of paper, and at the end of the week, I scan that document into my email and I forward it to the parents. I say, this is what they've been doing this week, and if there's anything that happens throughout the week that requires kind of an urgent follow-up, I'll email them or call them that very same day. Say, hey, they did this today. We both need to address this in a timely manner. And what that's helped with is, instead of just my student going home with a bad conduct marked or something, they go home and their parents know exactly what they did that day. They talk them through it, and then that behavior is changed the next day. This is just my experience, but I really think that this is something that people can pull from, things that people can learn from. And like I said, college did not prepare me for this as a teacher, and even my student teaching year didn't really prepare me for this. I sat in on a few parent conferences and phone calls, and kind of went through some documents with my mentor teacher to kind of understand what was going on, but I really didn't understand that saving work samples, documenting all of their behaviors, positive or negative, communicating with the parent, and then documenting that communication, whether it's printing out the emails or typing up a summary of the things that you talked about. And it all goes a long way. And I didn't touch on it very much, but saving student work samples is a big thing as well, because when you have to have a meeting about, hey, this student's grade has been slipping, or if they were already low and there's been no growth, you need something to show that, and you want to be able to look at it and say, oh, this is where they went wrong here, this is what I think was going on in their head. You want to really evaluate this. And I even write notes on my students' papers too. If I say I noticed they did this in like some non-graded work as well, or if like maybe the student refuses to do the work or kind of gives up, I can mark that. We had a really lengthy math test one time where I watched the student was doing well throughout about 70-80% of the test, and at the end puts his pencil down or puts his head in his hands, even though it was the same things he had already been doing and knew how to do. It's just the mental exhaustion. And so I was able to write that down, like, the student's mental stamina is not where he needs to be quite yet. And so there's so much documentation that goes into it, and it's gonna save you a lot of trouble, because you don't have to go digging through trying to find old things, or like, you save it and you keep it organized. And it also puts you in a position where you have undeniable proof of whatever it is going on, because sometimes the parent will try to deny, I didn't get a call about this, I didn't get an email about this, I printed it out already, I saved it in my email folder, here's the documentation of their work that I sent home, here is the notes that I left on it, all this stuff. It really goes a long way. The last thing regarding teaching, do your kids know that you box? No, they do not. Long story short, when I was student teaching, when we had Meet the Teacher at the beginning of the year, I mentioned my hobbies. I was like, oh, I play piano, I like to run, I like to box. And no red flags went off. All the parents are just like, oh, he's a regular person, he's a regular human being. And then at the end, when me and my mentor teacher opened it up for questions, kid raises their hand and says, so you box, do you like to hurt people? And all of the parents gave me a look like, do you like to hurt people? And I was like, first off, no. Second off, even if I did, I wouldn't hurt a child. So it's just best not to mention it. And I have had situations before where some of my students' parents have found out, just hearing through the grapevine at work, or by other means found out that I box. And, I just assure them that I don't condone violence. I like boxing as a martial art, as a way to express, my mental fortitude, to express my willpower and determination. Art is an expression, and boxing is a martial art. And so boxing is really an expression of all the characteristics I have that you can't quite put a physical quality to until you see me box. Which leads me to some boxing questions. Kicking it off with the first one, what got me into boxing? And I'm a little ashamed to admit this story, but I'm also not ashamed, because this is how I got into boxing. So about 4 or 5 years ago now, maybe getting close to 6 years ago now, I had just moved into my college dorm with my best friend, and this is before classes even started, probably like a week before, and he says, do you want to watch the KSI and Logan Paul fight with me? And I was like, the who and the what? The only boxing match I had seen prior to this was Mayweather versus McGregor. And I picked McGregor for that fight, which should show you how little I knew about boxing going into this. And while we were watching it, we also had another group of friends who were watching it elsewhere. And so we're all just talking mess in the group chat, saying, oh, a year from now, so-and-so is going to box this person, so-and-so is going to box this person. Everybody in this group chat except me and my roommate, have thrown some hands before. They've gotten into some tussles. Me and my roommate never gotten into any kind of tussle. So what do I say in the group chat? I call out probably the most experienced, especially in terms of boxing, the most experienced person in the group chat, saying me and him are gonna box in a year. And everyone's like, yeah, right. And as it keeps going, The buildup is there. We're both talking trash to one another. We're building it up. We've got a location. We've got a date. We've got like judges. We've got ring walks ready to go. And so, long story short, I didn't end up boxing him. I ended up boxing somebody else. I believe the person I was supposed to box had like a back injury or something from work that was pretty serious. And so we got a last minute replacement though. The week before, he and I hopped into the ring and he whooped me into next Sunday. When I say he was hitting me, like he hit me so hard that I did a 360. And oh boy, was that a wake-up call. But it was also, at that point in my life, the most fun I had ever had doing almost anything. Like it was like a top 5 moment at that point in my life for sure. And so I was like, I have got to keep with this boxing stuff. And a few months later, probably like 7-8 months later, I found a boxing gym. I joined, and I have never looked back since. It's one of my favorite hobbies that I have, and every day I look forward to getting to practice boxing. And the next question brings us back into teaching a little bit. Somebody asked, how do I balance teaching and boxing? And the answer is so much easier said than done. It's just being fully committed to both. Like being a teacher, that's my big boy job. That's how I keep the lights on. That's how I'm able to afford to live on my own and stuff like that. And so I'm fully committed to teaching. But there's a saying that boxing is a jealous sport. You give your time anywhere else and you're going to get worse at boxing. You could get hurt when you hop in the ring. And so I have to be very committed to boxing. If I'm not teaching, I better be boxing if I don't want to get hurt, especially if I've got like a competition or something coming up. My coaches will tell me, if you're not in here 5-6 days a week, like forget it, you're not competing. Because it's serious. If you're competing as a boxer, you can get hurt. And so to balance both, I have to recognize my identity as a teacher and as a boxer, and I have to be fully committed to both of those things. Which is very difficult to do because I'm also a musician. I have, different social groups that I take part in. I'm very much pulled in a lot of directions, and so it's very hard to stay committed to teaching and boxing, or it's very hard to balance teaching and boxing. And so the way that I do it is just by being fully committed to both. And then so I just mentioned right now that I'm also a musician, and one of my friends asks, how and when did I get into piano? And I got into piano when I was about in the 3rd or 4th grade. I didn't start actually taking piano lessons until about halfway through the 4th grade, but towards the tail end of 3rd grade, I was like, I have got to learn this instrument. It was, my grandparents had one at their house, and every time I was over there for a family gathering or anything, I always loved to try and pick out some of my favorite songs that I liked. And I remember one time I can't remember if it was both of my grandparents or if it was one of them and my uncle, but they were duetting Heart and Soul on the piano. And I was like, 2 people can play a song together? That's the coolest thing ever. And I had one of them show me. And from there, I just kind of had an affinity for it. And so I asked my parents, can I please start taking piano lessons? They found me a great lesson teacher that I stuck with for about 1.5 years before I went to a middle school that was specifically for fine arts students, where I had 3 years of just piano training there. Particularly my first 2 years, I had the most phenomenal piano teacher. Taught music theory super well, taught technique very well, was, they really made sure that I had a foundation to be a strong musician no matter what I decided to do. Because I was at that middle school for band and piano, and so they made sure I had a strong enough foundation to be good at any instrument I wanted to play in the band. At the time, I was a percussionist, and made sure that I had a strong foundation to be able to understand what I was doing if I ever got into writing songs like what I'm doing now. And not only were they such a good piano teacher, they were one of the best teachers that I've ever had as well. And just their energy just made me fall in love with music so much more than I already had. And so I've been considering the fact that I've been playing piano for upwards of 10 years now, getting really close to 15. The fact that I've been playing piano for almost 15 years, I'm nowhere near as good as I should be for someone who's been playing that long. But I've also never had the desire to give up on piano. Even whenever I was thinking about maybe I don't want to do band anymore, maybe I don't want to play with the group anymore, I've always I still wanted to learn music. And what that's led me to now is, creating my own songs and playing and singing other songs that I like with my horrible singing voice that people tolerate sometimes. I'm being a little facetious. I think some people, maybe a few, might like my songs, might like my singing. Another question somebody asked is, what is my peak life moment? Which is so near impossible to nail down. But if I did have to pick one, I would have to say it would be when I graduated college. Because, and not to be one of those, oh, you have to go to college to be successful. I don't believe in that really at all. I think college can do a lot of great things for a lot of people, but I don't think it's what everybody needs. That being said, though, my college graduation was one of my peak moments, because anyone who knows me really well knows how hard school was for me, how hard it was to do anything good as a student, how hard it was for me really to learn. It's so crazy to me and some of my friends that I'm a teacher, because I had so much trouble in school. Why would I ever do more school? But yeah, if you know how much I struggled with college, you know how much that moment meant to me. And truly peak was, my younger sibling bet me that I wouldn't trip whenever I was walking the stage. And we didn't even bet money. They just said, bet you won't. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And then I did it. And so it was really fun that I got to kind of own my moment and make it my own in my own funny, clumsy way. And I can remember that day so vividly. I can remember waking up, putting on my graduation cap with a hoodie on. I didn't wear the hoodie to graduation. I remember putting on the outfit that I had picked out weeks prior. I was like, this is my graduation outfit. And even though it was so hot outside, it was already 95 degrees in the middle of May. I was wearing a turtleneck. Don't care. I looked fly. It was, I just remember sitting there with people that I didn't even really know. I was just yo, we made it. We did the thing. We made it. We're here. And then just that moment when I knew that even though I had turned in a card that showed them how to phonetically pronounce my name, that they were going to mispronounce it. Not my first name. Anyone can pronounce Vincent. My last name, which I will not share here. But I knew they were going to get it wrong, even though I showed them exactly how to say it. And of course they got it wrong. Don't care. I owned it. It was my moment. I did my little trippy thing where I fell over, and then just what a glorious day. What a glorious day. Which leads me into, what are some of my future goals? Some of my future goals, I'm going to kind of break it down. I'm going to break down some of my future goals as a teacher, as a boxer, and as a musician. As a teacher, I have two main future goals. One of them is that I want to get good enough at my job that by the end of the year, I can get all my students to be proficient in all the subjects that I teach them, which is a ridiculous goal to set, but it's something that I truly believe that I can do. I think that with a good enough teacher, even if you have dyslexia, if you have ADHD, if you have other learning needs, if you are bilingual or an ESL student, I don't care what the hindrance is. I believe that with a good enough teacher, you can. I I I think it can be done. Maybe I'm a fool for thinking that, but I think it can be done, and so I'm gonna do it. That's one of my goals as a teacher. And then I have a second goal as a teacher is that I hear a lot about the education system in New Zealand being one of the top rated in the world. And so I think it would be great to go there, learn what I can about their education system, and bring it back and apply it here where I live. See if I can, kind of make a difference in that way. Future goals as a boxer, I don't care if I make a career out of it or not. I want to compete professionally at least once. Even if I lose money on it, because I know that's kind of a big thing, is like your first couple fights, you might not make any money, you might even lose money, paying your coach, if you pay a nutritionist, the promoter gets his cut, whatever. Like, I don't care if I lose money on it. I would like to compete professionally as a boxer at least one time, because amateur accolades and all that stuff it's great and everything, but I want to at some point be able to say, and then I stepped it up from there. I want to take it to the highest level that I possibly can. And I'm not saying it's a waste if I don't take it to the highest level I possibly can, but I do think that, like, if the goal is not the top, then I will always kind of fall short of where I want to be. Which, granted, if the goal is the top, that would be, like world champion or the undisputed champion in a particular weight class. But, I feel like as long as I'm always shooting for higher than I think, as the type of person who just so strongly believes in myself, I think that by shooting way too high, I can maybe get there. You never know. So that's going to do it for this Q&A video. I hope you learned whatever it is you wanted to learn about me. I hope you took away maybe some sort of lesson, something inspiring. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a great day. You guys take care, and I will see you in the next video.